Welcome to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. We interview great guests who inspire you to overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Be sure you visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, just relax as you listen. You can do something else, but be ready to make an important note. And let's get started.
The title of this interview is Becoming a Warrior Mystic in a Time of Chaos. We'll be talking about men's self-development, archetypes and self-development, shutting out distractions and focusing on our true purpose, facing our fears, and forging the future we want. And our guest is Angel Millar, a fellow New Yorker. I'm in Brooklyn, he's in Queens, so we got Long Island covered. And he's a very interesting person. Angel Millar is the author of The Path of the Warrior Mystic, Being a Man in an Age of Chaos, and The 3 Stages of Initiatic Spirituality, Craftsman, Warrior, Magician, both published by Inner Traditions. He is also a longtime practitioner of martial arts. I'm a practitioner of Jeet Kune Do, by the way, but I'm a little off these days. I got to get back into it. But I love martial arts where it's at. And also inner alchemy meditation. I want to hear about that. As a self-development author, he has explored the archetypal symbolism and myths in many of the world's cultures, especially in regard to how they help us navigate a world that is increasingly dogmatic. Boy, is that ever applicable, and can help us to develop individually as whole people. Besides his latest book, Exploring Self-Development for Men, his major contribution has been to focus on 3 archetypes of the craftsman, warrior, and magician, believed by philologists and historians to be the 3 earliest functions that structured tribal societies. In regard to his work as a hypnotist, certified by the National Guild of Hypnotists, he focuses on self-development, which is where I'm at. That's my language right there. As part of the sessions, he often refers to world spiritual traditions or archetypes, which are explored in his books. On occasion, he also uses guided visualizations using these archetypes, as well as some inner energy techniques to help those who are looking to progress spiritually. Ladies and gentlemen, and others, I present to you Angel Millar. Welcome, Angel.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's good to be here.
I really appreciate you joining me. This will be posted much later, but it's Sunday morning, relatively early, and usually don't do an interview this morning, but it's great. It's a great way to start a Sunday. So I really thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
I love what you're about, man. That's some really interesting, great stuff. And you really go into the older traditions and studies and make it modern or accessible to the modern people. I'm studying Stoicism right now. I'm studying the book Meditations, and those ancient philosophers, they were right on, man. They were right on. So great stuff. So let me ask my first question. Why did you write The Path of the Warrior Mystic, Being a Man in an Age of Chaos? And what need did you see for it?
Well, a few different reasons. One is it's, in a sense, a kind of follow-up to the 3 stages of initiatic spirituality. But really, just what I see going on in society. And, over the last 5 years in particular, I've been able to go around and give talks around the US, everywhere from Texas to LA to New York, of course, to smaller states like New England as well. And whenever I speak to men of really from 20s all the way through to late 50s, almost without exception, they tell me they had a horrible childhood. Father was either totally out of their life, or an alcoholic or abusive or just emotionally unattached, and they had no sort of initiation into manhood whatsoever. And it wasn't entirely different for me either. And it's very rare for me to come across a man who says, "Yeah, I had a great father who really initiated me into manhood, taught me what the sort of foundation of what I need to know." Very, very rare. And that's obviously one problem in itself. But of course, today our society, it seems to me, and I don't think I'm alone in this, loves to blame men for all of the ills of society. Everything that goes wrong is somehow the fault of a man somewhere. And it's almost
We seem
as
to
if
be in the age of no personal responsibility. I think
that's, yeah,
I've never seen
definitely.
personal responsibility so forsaken as today.
Yeah, yeah, and even worse than that in a sense is the idea that if you believe in personal responsibility, you're in a sense an oppressor, because not everybody can get out of their circumstances. So therefore, it's not fair because someone somewhere would not be able to rise up through their own esteem. Um, you know, so yeah, we live in a peculiar age where men have a very bad start in life generally, but they're blamed for everything that goes wrong, and no one, and there's no sense that we should take personal accountability for our actions or
Yes,
be encouraged to take them.
particularly an anti-masculinity
Yeah,
theme or movement. This seems to be having more and more steam. Well, I see
yeah,
more conflict now. People are saying, "Whoa, hey, whoa, men aren't all bad. People are
right.
both bad and good. Everyone,
Mhm.
men and women." But there
Yeah,
is a distinct anti-masculine movement and propaganda and
yeah.
cultural, morass that's going on about. It's incredible, man. How wow, we're bad. I'm bad. I didn't realize I was this bad.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, no sense of the men have suffered throughout history as well. And I'm lucky I've never been to war or anything, but I think my statistics are pretty much right. But during the World War One, during I think it was the Battle of the Somme, on day one, 20,000 men on the British side were killed. That's day one. So I mean, when men historically have had some advantages, but they've also had to be forced to go to war and
Yeah, absolutely.
experience carnage. So it's not a zero-sum game. Of course, there are imbalances.
I'm an ex-paratrooper, so I really sympathize with military
Yeah,
men and service women as well. But
yeah,
certainly, men, you can blame them for certain ills and problems. But the fact is, men have done most of the dying and suffering
yeah.
in jobs and in
Hmm.
war. Obviously, war, the worst people suffer, the
War.
people suffer most in war are civilians. But
Yeah, definitely.
aside from that, in terms of doing the fighting, men
Hmm.
do almost the exclusive dying and suffering.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I really wanted to really look at the sort of initiatic path into manhood. And looking at some of the problems that we face today, which are many of them are very strange and unique to our time. But I would say, unlike the sort of quote unquote men's movement, or a lot of sort of men's gurus are out there, yeah, this is for men, and it's all sort of like, yeah, we're going to go to the woods with our penknife and we're going to hunt squirrels and eat them, and wear fur or something like that, and get back to being cavemen or something.
Okay, are you
I
making a
don't.
distinction between all that and what you do?
Yeah, yeah, and
Great.
and I would say that working out, being strong, experiencing nature, these are all good things. But from what I have seen, and I'm not an expert in the men's movement, there tends to be a little bit of a kind of cliche that we're sort of manly men, we're sort of like bears or something. But I look back to more classical models that you can really find in every civilization. I don't want to ditch civilization and go back to the woods. But when you look at classical civilizations, there's always this union of the sort of feminine and the masculine in the sort of highest type of warrior. So the samurai. There's many things that would be regarded as feminine in the samurai today, but you look at Miyamoto Musashi, the greatest samurai of his time, probably even still. He not only was a great warrior, but he also wrote calligraphy, painting. He's renowned for his painting in Japan. He was also renowned for landscape gardening during his day as well. Or in the West, you have someone like Egil Skallagrimsson, an extremely violent probably psychopathic individual, extremely violent and feared, but at the same time, he was revolutionary in poetry and introduced end rhyme. That's the first person to use end rhyme in Norse poetry. And you can find this, in other cultures and in other times as well. But there's always this fusion of the hard and the soft, the warrior arts. And
my school, my Jeet Kune Do school,
yeah,
its emblem, indeed, my Sifu, my martial arts instructor, always teaches and professes yin yang, yin and yang, the soft and the hard. That's the core of what we learn and what we do.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I've studied Kung Fu as well, which Jeet Kune Do is very closely related to, if not regarded as Kung Fu. And and there as well, we practice sparring with no pads. You get injured, but at the same time, practicing meditation, and also be encouraged to have a little bit of appreciation for Chinese culture and culture more generally as well. So yeah, in the martial arts, sometimes you still find that in good schools, I would say.
I really admire Chinese culture, except for the seemingly indifference to the suffering of animals. I do not like that. I do not like that at all. Well, other than that, they're very admirable, their culture. The whole Orient, very admirable, But of course, it can go awry, like in World War II, Japan. Boy, did it ever go awry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't think people quite realize how bad it was. But,
oh, my God. They were worse than the Nazis.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, pretty much.
So great stuff, man. So let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor, and we'll come right back and continue our conversation. All right, Angel?
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Proficio. Do you like learning by yourself or with others? What if you could do both at the same time? Visit www.proficio.io. That's proficio.io, where you can learn in the environment that suits you as you choose.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. We're talking with Angel Millar. We're talking about archetypes. We're talking about men, talking about masculinity. Really great stuff. I'm finding this conversation very intriguing. My next question to him about this theme is, unlike the men's movement generally, you advocate a classical model of masculinity and the cultivation of the hard and soft arts, the masculine and the feminine. Can you get into a little bit more detail?
Sure, yeah. So beginning an entranceway into that in a slightly strange way, of course. There's a great marketing guru in England called Rory Sutherland. He's pointed out something very intriguing, and he notes that rational thinking, which we kind of fetishize today, irrational thinking has really very severe limits. And I would say that 99% of our time, we're not thinking rationally. We are attracted to the non-rational.
I was about to say something like that.
Yeah. But we have this sort of fetishistic idea about rational thinking. Now, I believe in science, although these people never do any scientific experiments.
I will say this about rational thinking. Humans can rationalize to no end. We can rationalize anything, no matter how wrong, no matter how much we doubt it. We'll double down, we'll triple down on how we should rationalize it. We are the rationalization kings of perhaps the universe.
Yeah, and that's why it's actually really worth looking at someone like Rory Sutherland, because marketers know that we don't buy into things rationally. We have an emotional response to things, and then we rationalize it after. We see an advertisement for soda, and we say, "Oh, look at those smiling, attractive people drinking that soda. I want to be one of those people," in the back of our mind. And then we find reasons why drinking this drink, which is bad for us, is a good idea. But he points out that if you look at army generals, we would think that an army general, this dour individuals with all these medals who never crack a smile, would be very rational thinking. But he points out that they actually have to think more like artists, and they have to think non-rationally. Because if you think rationally in war, your enemy will always know what you're going to do. So you cannot think rationally. So the army general or the war leader actually has to think a lot more like an artist. than even most people in society. And then it kind of makes sense really of why these warriors like Miyamoto Musashi or Egil Skallagrimsson would be practicing poetry or calligraphy, or you think of the Crusaders who were big on poetry. That was a big part of Christian chivalry. Richard the Lionheart, who is renowned for his bravery in battle, is also supposed to have had a great interest in music. And there's actually an anecdote about Richard the Lionheart, which may or may not be true, but it's said about him that when he was battling the Muslim armies, he asked the brothers of Saladin if they could send over some musicians so he could hear their music, and apparently he's supposed to have loved what he heard. And so you kind of think, I couldn't imagine that happening today, but this is the ideal of the warrior, right? That we are enemies, but there's no hatred. We have an objective, but I can still appreciate your culture, and I can still want to learn about it and even absorb some of it, and that's what cultures do. But on a personal level, you find the sort of higher ideal of the warrior is someone who cultivates not only the physical aspects, being a warrior, being able to fight, going into battle, strengthening the body, but also, of course, learning these softer arts, calligraphy, poetry, philosophy, and cultivating some kind of spiritual practice as well, meditation, reflecting on mortality, reflecting on what might be beyond the grave, and so on. And so,
when I created Proficio, which is an automated virtual coaching program, it had to be effective, because if it wasn't effective, it would be useless, worthless. But that effectiveness is built on structure and helping people get away from our irrational nature. We get distracted, we get negative, we quit, we fall to other pressures. So these are all rational things, because if we really want to accomplish something, then we strive to do it. And then what happens is these things that I described get in our way, and before you know it, it's over. You're not even thinking about it anymore. And so it gets them back on the path, And so structure is a very necessary thing. Martial arts, and you deal with archetypes; those are structural.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I love structure, and that's actually one of my fortes. Organization, structure, roles. I love that. I'm all about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great stuff. Now, so we're talking about men and masculine archetypes. Does this apply to women? What can women get out of this?
Yeah, good question. So I personally, and this is probably another area where I diverge from the men's movement, which from what I've seen, again, it's, I have a limited experience with that, or appreciation for that. But, from what I've seen, it tends to be more like, okay, here's the man's role and here's the woman's role, and the woman will be nurturing and look after children. All of that, it's perfectly good. But my own perception is that men and women should basically be able to do the same things, but maybe the proportion will be different. So if you think about working out, well, you really want your men and women to be physically fit and strong, but obviously, sure, there are guys who are into super muscular women, or women that want to be super muscular, but 99% of the time plus, men are going to want to be more muscular than women want to be. So it's the same thing, but it's a different proportion. Same with, cooking food. Men should be able to cook food as well. It's a basic skill. So I don't have this major division between men and women in that sense. I think men and women should be able to do basically the same thing, but different proportion. But so the book actually,
we have different strengths and weaknesses and abilities, but we definitely should have equality. And
also as well, if what you wouldn't want, of course, is you wouldn't want to have, let's say, a family, and then the mother or father dies, and now there's this huge gap. Of course, you don't want the one parent to be able to take on the roles of both, but you do want to have like basic survival skills. Like, what if the guy who's very physically strong is away and it's just the woman there? You don't want her to be defenseless. She should be able to defend herself as well, to have some ability there. But I'm sure as a martial artist, you've practiced and trained with different women as well. So Yeah, it's perfectly capable. So the book itself is not much of it would apply to women as well. There are just a few things that would maybe seem a little strange to women about sex and stuff like that. But you know, the idea of you know, going into the unknown, of developing yourself, of facing challenges, you know, certainly whether we like it or not, or whether women like it or not, that's also a part of women's lives today as well. So you know, we all have to develop ourselves and face our fears and try to be the best we can be in these different areas. And I would say develop ourselves as whole human beings.
Now, this is something that both men and women are interested in. Career success, business success,
Yeah.
financial security. Does your content, your work get into that at all? Is it applicable in that arena?
It's definitely not the major focus. I do have one chapter on overcoming obstacles, and I look at how different innovators and mavericks often have these struggles that they go through in their childhoods. I think of Nikola Tesla. He almost died as a child, and it was only because he was able to convince his father that if he lived, would his father allow him to, you know, study science, that he was able to go into that. And you find this quite a lot, actually, that where you have innovators, they almost always have a terrible childhood, or something horrible that happens to them in childhood, like sickness or disease. The artist Munch, who painted the painting The Scream, among others, he lost his mother and his sister in his childhood, and suffered from depression from all his life. But when he would speak about it, he would say it was this depression and these horrible things that had happened. Without it, he would be rudderless. So it gave him a kind of orientation in life, and he was able to become this great artist. And to give a female example, Frida Kahlo, she originally wanted to be a doctor, and then she had this horrible accident where she was on a school bus, and there was a car went into the bus. She was thrown from the bus, impaled on a spike through her hips, and covered in gold glitter or gold paint, depending on who you read. But with this really bizarre accident, really sort of theatrical and bizarre, but really traumatic. You know, messed her spine up. She was in bed for I think a couple of years, all in all. And it was only at that time that she started to begin painting. She had no interest in it before that. And her father made her an easel, so she was able to paint lying down in bed. So it's only because of these horrible things that you get these people who are, you know, geniuses and innovators later on. And you know, everybody wants today to have these sort of very protected upbringings, and I must be protected from words I don't like, and and it's like, but you can do that, but you're not going to get anywhere in life. Or, you know, sure, you can manipulate the system and get, you know, a good management position, and maybe you'll be paid well, but you will never be who you could be.
Absolutely.
That's gone.
In my mind, triggers are something to overcome, not avoid.
Yeah, that's right, for sure.
They got it backwards. I mean, there's some backwards stuff going on.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, those triggers and that upset and those terrible things that happen to you, no one, I wouldn't wish them on anyone, but that's also the source of someone's power, when you can embrace that and overcome it.
Totally. Great stuff.
Yeah.
Let's take a quick moment to hear from our sponsor, and we'll be right back with Angel Millar.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Perficio. When Ben Franklin arrived in Philadelphia, all he had was 10 cents in his pocket. Despite this, he became America's first self-made man. Visit www.perficio.io. That's PERFICIO.io to actually have the knowledge and principles of Ben Franklin transferred into yourself.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. We're talking with Angel Millar about archetypes and fascinating stuff about masculinity, femininity, and these things, how they come from the past for the most part, but they're so applicable today. Is that an accurate summation, Angel?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously there are things that should be left in the past, but this idea of developing ourselves in this holistic sense is very relevant today. And I would say it's even more relevant than in the recent past, because I think as we go forward in the 21st century, we're going to need to be more generalists and more adaptable, more understanding of how things are going to rapidly change as well. So being a generalist, developing yourself as a whole is going to be an advantage, couple of decades.
Totally. We must be flexible, but we must be able to deal with various situations, especially when our resources are needed. A lot of times we can deal with something, but we're just not able to access our own resources that we have. But that access is critical.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about your previous book. In that, you focused on the 3 archetypal vocations of craftsman, warrior, and magician. Why? And why are they important today?
Yeah, good question. And some people that haven't read my book, you may know what it's compared to: king, warrior, magician, lover. And it's a totally different book, I would say. It's really night and day. But the reason I focused on those 3 archetypal vocations, or 3 archetypes, and not others, because there are all these other ideas about groups of archetypes, but it is simply that if you look back at ancient cultures, they are all pretty much structured along the lines of the warrior, the craftsman, and the magician, meaning the priest or the elder who can sort of guide society, and then everything else really comes after that. So that's really the foundational structure of ancient societies. But it's also, I would say, consequently, the sort of foundational structure of the human psyche as well. So, the warrior, the building up the body, strength, health, being able to defend yourself, having some kind of ability to be positively aggressive, to go after what you want. The craftsman having some kind of skill, and the magician understanding, having knowledge, having a wisdom, understanding how people work. So in a sense, it's also the archetypal mind as well.
So in different circumstances, you draw on the strengths of different archetypes.
Yeah. I mean, unconsciously, no doubt, but you kind of want to have those elements, the skill, some kind of, and I would say today, especially having a skill with your hands is a good thing, because we're becoming too absorbed in the world of social media and having these filters that make us look different, and we're kind of forgetting about reality itself. So having some kind of practical skills, whether that's writing or painting, or even if it's just cooking your own food, but having something that you can physically do is a plus. It's a way of really grounding yourself and giving yourself some sort of mental space. But the warrior, we definitely want to have physical strength, be able to defend ourselves, and the magician, this understanding of how the world works. And this may be controversial, but I would say that we're living in a time that is more and more one of magic in a quite negative sense. A lot of sort of ancient sort of magical things are returning in strange ways. So, for example, if you look at ancient tribal cultures, the magician or the sorcerer who would interact with spirits and communicate with the deities, those figures were very often what we would call transgender today. So you would have a man that dresses as a woman, and that may seem strange, but of course it's the idea from a tribal, sort of ancient perspective, that gender is in everything. So gender is in the trees, it's in the rocks, and it's unlike today. It's not a social construct; it's a real thing. So if you have a person who's both male holistic and female, yeah, that's right, and being both male and female, the shaman was, in a sense, reflecting nature. In the one sense, transgressing against it, but on the other hand, embodying it. So that's the kind of figure who would be able to communicate with spirits or deities, because he sort of elevated himself or put himself in this other world that's sort of above the ordinary, and it's closer to these sort of metaphysical figures. But we see this transgenderism is very coming back, and not just in a sort of cultural way, but more especially in a political sense. And the idea of language is essential to magic. So a lot of all sort of sorcery and magic is tied to language and the words you use, and you can use words to affect things through spells, etc. But today we have the idea that everything is, in a sense, is just language, and if I use different words, I am those different things, and the only thing that is really real is the language I use to describe things. So all this kind of magic is coming back. And so not only do we need to be able to be people who can think through things and contemplate and have knowledge and wisdom, but it's a good idea to have an appreciation of these ancient things which are coming back in sort of postmodern ways, and how to navigate them.
It could seem revolutionary, but it's really more probably cyclical. It's cyclic. It's coming back. But I think that I'm for revolution, though. I'm for personal development revolution. I need to strive to be my better self all the time. And using definitely. Archetypes, using martial arts, and whatever. Yeah. There's so many things available, but I think holistic way is the way to go, because I'm a practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. I was a personal development coach. You help people, but basically you use metaphors and in words so that people can understand them and make changes with those understandings. But really, people, we are holistic. We are a whole person. This, it's to divide that and see what the components are is not can't really be done. It's only can be understood in language, so that a person can make those changes themselves. That's right. And language, of course, it has this very negative way of being used today, where I say I'm this, so therefore I am, even if I'm not, and you have to accept it. But of course, language is also obviously it's essential to the way we think, and it is essential to our own self-conception, right? So Emile Coué had that mantra, and every day and every way I'm getting better and better, and it was one of the first people to really notice that what you said to yourself had an effect on what you became through your own molding your own self-image. So for sure. I'm very careful about my self-instruction. I'm very cognizant. I often correct myself, retract something, cancel. I'm striving for that, man. So how individually can we get on the path to becoming our true self?
Yeah, that's a good question. And of course it will differ for everyone, but I would say we really want to develop ourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually, or if you're not spiritual, so intellectually, culturally, we might say. And things work together. I was working with someone who was been unemployed for a long time, and one of the problems that he was having was that he was waking up at 9 and starting the day at 10. Of course, we all know what that means. That means it's 2 hours to lunch. Now it's after lunch. So I'll wait till tomorrow. And so, waking up early and beginning some practices. So for example, in the morning, I wake up very early. I wake up normally around 5:30 or before. I usually write for a couple of hours, and I also meditate as well. So the first thing I do in the day is already I'm getting down to work, but also meditating, focusing on my spiritual development. So that's the magician and the craftsman. And at least a few times a week I'm trying to work out as well, at least if nothing else, trying to bring in the warrior as well. But if you can, the easiest way is to just focus on what you want to do and try and draw in other things as you start using this energy, rather than just daydreaming about it, and then thinking about how can I bring in these other aspects, the mental, physical, and spiritual.
So energy is a critical part.
It's definitely a critical part, because when people start to let one thing go, often everything else starts to go as well. You get out of the routine. You say, what, I'm not going to work out this week, and then you I won't work on my project this week, and maybe I'll just let my diet go for a few days, and I don't need to read a book today, and then it all kind of goes. So if you can focus this energy on one thing, it's easier to draw in other things. And of course, you'll see all kinds of connections as you do it. So it'll be really easy after a while.
Definitely. I mean, energy. There's all kinds of practitioners using energy. There's all different kinds of energy. Energy is
Yeah.
I mean, we are energy, so it's a damn useful
Right.
thing to deal with, to apply. Great stuff. Let's take a final moment for our last commercial break, and we'll come back with the last segment with Angel Millar.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Perficio. What if you could get the results of being coached without a human coach? What if a computer could coach you? Visit www.perficio.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can get coached without scrutiny, judgment, or pressure.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. We're talking with Angel Millar. We just finished up with energy, and now we're getting to the final question for Angel. Angel, how can one live boldly and be true to our own nature in this time of deep uncertainty?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's probably not easy for many people, but I think
big one.
One thing that we can do that's actually pretty easy, although it takes a little bit of commitment, is that, we try not to get our sources of news or information or worldview from one source. You don't really just want to tune into your favorite news station and get your worldview from there, because whether it's on the left or the right, definitely you're not being told all the information. Information is being selectively missed out, and it's
sometimes called propaganda.
Yes, that would be another way of putting it, for sure. And we are bombarded by this propaganda, and it's, in a sense, it's necessary for media companies today, because they need to keep us afraid and clicking back so that they can appeal to advertisers. And you can't get people clicking back if you're presenting a rational argument. Okay, here's what this group says, this is what this other group says, here's the history. It's not going to work. So you have to get people afraid and heated up and anxious and angry, and then they will keep clicking back and spreading your propaganda. But to live boldly, we have to check out of that. So many people now, their lives are consumed by politics, and even though they may seem, I've met people that seem perfectly normal, I've known them, and then you get them onto the subject of politics, or they get onto it, and you see that they're transforming into a crazy person, and it's such a waste of energy. It's really, that energy is being drawn out of us, and people who get involved in this stuff, they can't do anything else in their own lives, and their own lives start to fall apart. So I think it's necessary that we take a step back from all of this media and propaganda and social media. If you're constantly looking on the left or the right, take a look at what the other side is saying and contemplate, is this true? Have an open mind, not so that you can swap sides, but so that you can take a step back and realize, I'm probably not getting all the information from either. And if I'm really that passionate about a subject, read a book on it, or read 5 books on it, and then get on with your own life and focus more on you and what you can do. You're not going to change the world by looking at the media or following a political party. You're just not. If you want to change the world, you need to change yourself and then set an example, and that's actually going to be much more effective.
What about these dangers of social codes, like political correctness and canceling?
Yeah.
What about dealing with those things like that?
Yeah, it's definitely tricky. Obviously, people don't want to be, don't want to be cancelled or have any sort of threats made against them or be humiliated in public. I think, again, partly it's, you should just check out of that. I know that people are very worried about, their speech being restricted, which is a real concern. But, at the end of the day, people who set a good example of how to live are going to be more appealing than people that are on social media screaming and being hateful. They're only going to be talking to themselves eventually, and most people don't really like them. But if you embody Yeah, if you embody what other people can be, then you're going to be instantly more attractive, and you'll have more sway over people eventually. And what the people on social media will discover is that you can restrict speech, and you can say you can't say those words. But the funny thing is, the more restricted that speech gets, the less you need to say to show your dissent from that hegemonic worldview. And so in the end, you can never really stifle free speech unless you have shooting of people, which has happened in some countries and could happen, I suppose. But other than that, it just gets easier and easier to show your dissent, or even by not going along with it verbally, then people can tell that, okay, this person doesn't believe the hype. And I'm sure you've been in conversations where someone will start talking to you about politics or something in a way that that they don't believe it, but they are comfortable with you because you're not spouting the sort of politically correct rhetoric and saying, and you're not hating on people, so they know, okay, I'm safe to express an opinion here. And maybe they won't agree, but they won't denounce me. So
but I think as we start at the outset, living boldly, if you're living with according to your higher values, especially your higher values, and you have faith in something, you can continue. But you've got to be positive, and you got to be aspirational. And being a cannon, a loose cannon, or a big mouth, that's not the way to go. It's got to be congruent with what your message is. It needs to be a positive one.
Yeah, that's right. Getting involved in this stuff is not helpful. To just focus on yourself. And definitely, you mentioned faith. Having some kind of faith is a good thing. Not necessarily, of a religion, but having some kind of belief in a higher power where you don't have to answer to these other people, because there's something that is truth, not my truth or your truth, but truth, that will empower you to act. And there is I'm not a Christian, but there is, that biblical statement, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And we today think, oh, that's terribly oppressive and all monsters. But of course, it depends on your circumstance, right? You as a former Marine will know fear of the Lord might just get you through that battle, because then you don't have to fear your enemy. That's the point. Obviously, if you're sitting on your couch munching Cheetos every night, then your fear of the Lord is oppressive. But this belief in something else, and that I have to answer to something else, or I might have to when I die, can help sweep all this nonsense away. Because who are these people in compared to the Lord, or whatever it might be, So having that faith as well, whether it's in a formal religious sense or not, could be very empowering for sure.
Angel, that is an excellent ending. This has been a wonderful conversation. Do you have any final remarks for the audience?
Well, you can check out my books on all of the usual places, or check out my website, Angel Millar, AngelMillar.com. That's it.
That's with an A, people, not an E. That's with an A for the R at the end. So look for that. Get that right. Very good. This has been great stuff. More and more I'm finding that the old, like I said, NLP, I like this modern stuff. I used to make fun of New Ages up until I realized I was one of them. So I love the modern stuff, right? And the new thought. Yeah. But more and more, I'm going to the ancients, the old philosophers, more and more. And so what you said really speaks to me, really resonates. And I think a lot more other people are catching on. And I know they are. Yeah. I know that there's greater interest and following of the ancient philosophers and stuff like what you're about, archetypes. I think is going to become bigger and more popular because it's probably really effective. And I tell you, just looking at you, your demeanor, you're very calm, you're very deliberate. You breed confidence. so
thank you.
So it's great stuff, and it's been a really great discussion.
Likewise,
Thank you for joining us, Angel.
Thank you.
I want everyone to remember that we're all responsible for ourselves, and we can all use a little help. And with that, thank you, Angel Millar, and we'll see you on the next Self-Help Coaching Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. Remember to visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Self-Help Coaching Podcast.